everyone. Today we have Elizabeth Joy here. She is a birth doula and she is a prenatal coach, also an amazing podcast, founder of Miraculous Mamas. And today she's going to talk to you about making the birth you want happen and finding a supportive birth team. So go ahead, take it away.
All right. So as Hannah said, I'm a birthing doula. I really got passionate about it a little over 10 years ago, just kind of seeing how birth was happening to a lot of my friends. They felt like birth was happening to them, not that they were like an active participant in the experience. So I started doing some digging, found out what doulas do, and really wanted to partner with moms in that birthing journey, especially after watching my sister give birth to her children at home. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. I feel like you're not, at least like where I grew up, I was never shown like a birthing video of like, hey, this is what happens when you get pregnant and you have a baby. So watching her give birth to my nephew was just mind blowing. Because that was my first birthing experience. And so her midwife was so patient with her. It was a very long birth. It was at her house. And then shortly after, a lot of my friends started giving birth and they were having just completely different experiences. And I also did like a lot of research on birthing in the United States, and we don't have the best maternal health outcomes compared to other high income nations. So I just really wanted to be a part of that change. And so the last couple of years, I've really focused on my doula work and the podcast and stuff like that. So talking today about making the birth that you want happen, finding the supportive birth team, those two are actually like the same thing. So if birthing can go so many different ways and there's tons of planning you can do, but I prefer to call birth plans birth wishes, because there are some things that are out of your control. And I'll share a little bit of my story with my daughter, but the most important thing is that you're going in informed. And so the first thing that I'm super passionate about and that I tell people to do is to create a birthing plan. Even if you're somebody who is like, I'm just going to go with the flow, whatever happens, happens. You never know what's going to happen. So when decisions are being made super quick and you don't know what's going on, you feel like that is happening to you and you're not an active participant. You don't know, you're not equipped with the right questions to ask, like, hey, do we need to do this intervention right now? Okay, what's going to happen if we start this? Like, what are the risks? What are the benefits? What happens if we give my body some more time? Because you're not equipped to know exactly what's going on. So the birthing plan is going to serve as a guideline for that. And there's so many different templates out there. If you Google birthing plan, one will pop up. And the point of it is to educate you, not to say like, this is exactly what I want. You can have in your mind for sure what you want and do all the right things to make sure that it goes that way. But the whole point is to educate you. So I'm going to go over a couple of examples. So I was looking up before this, the C-section rates in Canada, because I'm from the States, and in the United States, the cesarean rate is 31.7%. And in Canada, it went from 18.7% in 97 to 28.2% in 2016. So that in the C-section rate increased 50% over 20 years. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. But again, a lot of it goes back to being informed and knowing your options. So there was a study done in Canada of about 300,000 women who were giving birth. And in that, they saw that the C-section rate for women who were induced was 33.5%. And then the C-section rate for women who went into labor spontaneously was 18.4. So even just looking at the study, you see that induction raises the risk of cesarean births. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Not to say that inductions are bad. They can save lives. There's times where inductions are medically necessary. But again, that goes back to the birth plan of looking at what are my options? Okay, if I have to be induced, what are the actual things that that qualify as a medical induction? What are the things where maybe I could give my body more time? What are the methods of induction that lead to the least amount of interventions? So these are all things that you can kind of research when going through the birthing plan process to find the best things for your body. But again, it kind of goes back to that creating the right birthing team. So educating your partner first is a big thing. I'm a big fan of taking a childhood education course. If you can, there's a lot of different ones ranging from like $50 to $500. So any type of birthing course that you can take is great information for you and your partner to help them kind of be on board with things. I know, like, trying to explain some things to my husband, he's like, wait, what? But then when you hear it from somebody who's trained and experienced in teaching this course or presenting certain statistics and research, they digest the information a little bit differently. And that is a big key to educating you, helping you develop your birthing plan, and also getting your partner on board. Another thing that is super important is choosing the right provider. That is probably one of the things that I am most passionate about, is bringing this information to your provider. So I'm not sure like how a lot of the appointments maybe work in Canada, but I know here usually around 36 weeks, you go over your birthing plan. And it sucks when you're that far along and then your provider's like, oh, I don't let people go past 40 weeks. We have to, like, if you go past 40 weeks, we're going to induce. Or like, you know, we don't allow intermittent monitoring. And so to be like that far along and then find that your partner or your provider's not in the same place and having to find like a new one is tough. But I always encourage people that that's what you need to do. So finding a provider that is going to acknowledge how you want to birth, to trust that you've done your research as well, and that you know will be supportive during your experience is super, super important. I know here in the Chicago area, there's one hospital that has a super, super high C-section rate and a very low VBAC rate, meaning that they don't really allow a lot of people to have VBACs. And then there's another one that has like a 15% C-section rate and a 75% VBAC rate. So if I'm going in for, if I had a cesarean with my first birth and I'm wanting to do a VBAC, a vaginal birth after a cesarean for my second, I'm going to choose the hospital that has that super high rate at it. Even if like I love my provider at this one place, you never know for sure if they're going to be the one delivering. You don't know for sure what their hospital policies are. And maybe they say they're on board, but they really might not be. So a lot of it comes down to doing your research, looking at the providers, the statistics of where you're birthing to help create that experience that you really want. I like, for example, I went to a provider here when I first moved to Chicago. I didn't like know anyone. So I just went to the gynecologist that my husband's whole family went to. And I remember just like asking him, I was like getting a pap smear. So I was just asking him birthing questions because my husband and I were about to get married. And I'm like, we're probably going to start family planning in like a year. And one of the first questions I asked him, I said, do you allow women to birth in different positions? He said, no, you have to birth on your back. And I was like, okay, well, I know for sure that this is not where I'm going. Like, even if I loved him and he was great, he was really nice, but I knew that I didn't want to be at a place where I'd be forced to birth on my back. because that doesn't make sense with physiological birth. And so I searched for a new place. Luckily, like I wasn't pregnant yet. It wasn't like in the middle of the process. It was before all of that, but it does make a huge difference finding that provider who is going to be supportive of you in your birth. And again, if you are just now like starting these conversations, it's never too late to try to switch providers. The only thing that can suck is like with insurance and things like that. Let's say you don't want to go to this one place, but you want to go to this other place, but insurance might not cover it. So that can be tricky if you're trying to find something new or something that a different provider offers. But that's also then where I highly recommend hiring a doula. I am a huge fan of doulas, not only because I am one, but also there's so much research behind the benefits of doulas. There's a lot of stuff going on in the States right now, pushing insurance companies to cover doulas because the medical costs go down. It's cheaper to pay for a doula than it is to pay for all the extra medical costs that happen when doulas aren't present. So doulas decrease the cesarean rate by 30%. They decrease the epidural rate. They increase natural or decrease induction rates. And one of the coolest studies, I think, is about doulas and your partner. And they interviewed women who had a doula present 20 years later about their birthing experience. And the ones who had a doula present had fonder memories of their birth and fonder memories of their partner. There's a big misconception that doulas are going to replace the partner, which is not our role at all. But the birthing person actually had better memories of their partner because the doula was there giving the partner a role to do, helping the partner be more involved if that's what they want, or the doula was focusing on other things while the partner could be right here with you. So it was a really cool study because a lot of hesitation you get from partners. They're like, well, then what am I going to do if there's a doula there? Whereas I had a doula at my birth and my husband was right by my side the entire time. I honestly barely remember my doula at my birth, and I remember him just like telling me I could do it the whole time. But she had me doing cartwheels and everything all over that labor room. So she was definitely there working hard. But I just remember my husband because he could just really focus on me and pay attention to me while she was helping me deal with the pain. So making the birth that you want happen isn't necessarily about, I want an unmedicated water birth with A, B, and C. Not saying that those things can't happen. They absolutely can. But in order to make those things happen, you have to be educated on the process. You have to have a supportive birthing team. And then you have to mentally prepare, which is awesome that all of you guys showed up here today, because yoga, taking time to feel your body, to connect with your baby, to connect with your breath, all of these things are so important during labor. When you hit that point where you are tuning in intuitively and it's just you and your body, and when you're aware of your body, when you're aware of your baby and you know these different points, then you are so much more connected and you know how to use your power. One of my mantras this time around has been, it's not pain, it's power. That's something that I tell myself every single night, because with my daughter, I feel like I suffered through a lot of the labor instead of surrendering through it. So that's kind of been one of my mantras. But I want to share with you quick before we wrap up a little bit about my birthing story and how doing the research, having a great birthing plan, having a great birthing team kind of saved me, even though my birth didn't go at all what I thought that it would. And I was kind of in labor off and on for a couple of days. And then my water broke, ended up going into the hospital. And since I work as a birth doula, I'm very aware of like those steps that naturally progress in labor. And I told my husband, I'm like, one of my biggest fears is that I'm either going to go into the hospital and they're going to be like, you're 1 or 2 centimeters dilated, or I'm going to go in and we're going to have a car baby, because I'm just going to be like waiting at home and be like, no, we have time. I don't want to get there too soon. It's my first birth. Well, we get to the hospital and I'm 2 centimeters dilated. And I'm like, no, like I feel these contractions coming hard. And so my doula meets us there, and I honestly don't remember a lot for like the first 7 hours, but it took me like 8 hours to go from a 2 to a 5, which there's no like linear, not everybody progresses the same. So it was really tough. And the way that I was birthing seemed like I was further along than I was. So I was throwing up. I was just in so much pain. Not a lot of things were helping. And the midwife did an exam, and the baby was sunny side up and asynclinic. So she was facing the wrong way and cockeyed. She was like hitting my pelvic floor like this instead of coming through. So I was experiencing so much pain in my hips, and there was really nothing I could do except for try different birthing positions to try to open my pelvis to get her to engage and get in. So at that point, I was like, maybe I want the epidural. And then I talked to my husband. I'm like, no, I can keep going. So it was about noon. And then at 7 p.m., so I was 5 centimeters at noon. At 7 p.m., I'm like, can you check me again? Because I feel like I'm dying and like, I don't know if I want to keep going or not. And she checked me again, and I was a 7. So I decided at that point to get the epidural. And for me, it was not what I envisioned. I planned on this beautiful, unmedicated water birth. And once you get the epidural, you can't birth in the water. But my birthing team was so supportive and so loving. And because I knew my options, like I knew the statistics behind an epidural, I knew the risks, I knew the benefits, I knew how it could affect my labor. And I made the best informed decision for myself in that moment of my body needs this as a tool right now, because I cannot relax because of the pain that is happening. So after I got the epidural, 2 hours later, I pushed out my baby. So my body literally just needed to completely relax so the baby could engage, and then she came right out. And my birthing team was so supportive. And I thought that I was going to feel like I failed myself and my body because I ended up having a medicated birth. But because I knew that I wasn't forced into it, nobody ever brought it up to me. Nobody was like, honey, you should get the epidural. Like, it was my decision. And then when I was pushing the baby out, the birthing team made the biggest difference because I had chosen the midwife that I did. She actually saved me from having a cesarean. There was at one point when I was pushing the baby out, and a nurse busted in and was like, the doctor wants to know why you're not prepping her for a cesarean right now. My midwife was like, because she's pushing the baby out right now. And midwives in the United States typically tend to focus more on physiological birth. And studies, I also know this too, because doing the birthing plans, studies show when you have continuous monitoring of the baby, there's more C-sections that happen, but not better fetal outcomes. So more cesareans happen when they're continually watching every little thing that the baby's doing, but those C-sections aren't leading to better results. The results are the same, whether you have continuous monitoring or not. It's only leading to higher C-section rates. But once you get the epidural, they have to monitor the baby. So I knew that that was a risk, that they would be monitoring the baby. Once you add drugs involved, like they want to make sure how the baby is reacting, which is very understandable. So I knew that that was a risk, but I had my birthing team there who was advocating for me. And shortly after that nurse busted in, like within the next 20 minutes, I pushed her out. So So I felt walking away from my birth that it wasn't what I envisioned at all. But because of my birthing team, because of how I was treated throughout the birth, my midwife, my doula, my husband, the nurses were awesome. I was very familiar with this hospital, which is also why I chose to birth there. Everyone was so supportive throughout the whole thing. And I never was made to feel like I couldn't do it. I never felt like birth was happening to me. I never felt that because I chose like a different path that I failed. I had the supportive birth team to talk to me, to be like, you made the right decision for your body in this moment. And so that was the biggest key things that happened. So I just wanted to give you an example of how those things kind of all work together. But I mean, this time I'm going to a birthing center. There's not an option for an epidural. So, but I have the same birthing team. I have the same midwife. I have the same doula, and then my husband will be there. And I've also been doing more yoga this time and just working a lot more on connecting with my breath, my pelvic floor, doing a lot more affirmations. So it is kind of having the birth you want happen is more about the feeling that you have after. Did I feel validated? Did I feel heard in my experience? Did I feel loved and supported? Or was this just something that is happening to me? So I do want to answer Jessica's thing. So it says, I've heard that epidurals can slow down dilation, but in your case, it allowed your body to do its thing. So epidurals can slow down dilation if they're given too early. I was already in transition. So a lot of times when it's given after a certain point, it can really help if the problem is that you're holding on to too much tension. Like I just couldn't let go. Like during the contractions, I was trying so hard to relax my body and I could not, because the way she was positioned, she was like on this nerve in my leg. So this pain would shoot down my legs, like every single contraction. And I felt like they were being ripped off of my body. So there's like times when epidurals can definitely be used as a tool. And then there are times when you're creating the birthing plan and you're learning about epidurals where it can slow down dilation. So then they start to use Pitocin, and then it kind of becomes this game of epidural Pitocin, increasing Pitocin, and then there's a cascade of interventions that follow. So that definitely is something that can happen with an epidural, but it also can be used as a tool when it's used in that way. Because I've also been present at other people's births where they were stuck and then they got an epidural and then the baby was born just because they could not release that tension. So there are times where it definitely is a tool. And then there are times where it can kind of create some problems. Is there a secret centimeter amount for epidural? Every case is different. I mean, but they don't I know some places do say they don't recommend it before like 4, 5, or 6 centimeters, just because that can happen. But every single case is very, very different. I don't know, Hannah, sorry, did you want to read them out to me or do you want me to read them?
You're so fast, you might as well read it. Well, Naomi asked you a question about how do you know when to push back, for example, in your OB, if your OB wants a C-section. How do they decide if they are recommending it or for good reason or if there's some wiggle room?
Well, that's the hard part. So we tend to see doctors as just kind of like this authoritarian figure, right? Like, oh, they're saying I should do this, I must do this. But there's a huge piece that's missing from there, and that's your intuition. So one acronym that I would make note of that I always tell everybody to do, it's called BRAIN. And you just ask them, what are the benefits? What are my risks? What are the alternatives? What is my intuition telling me? And what happens if we do nothing? So a lot of times nothing can be an option. If they're like, well, I think we need to do a C-section. And you're like, okay, well, what if we do nothing right now? What if we give my body a couple more hours to see what happens? Like, is the baby's life actually in danger? Is my life in danger? So being equipped with the information too, let's say you are being continuously monitored, you know that leads to higher C-section rates. You know that it doesn't lead to better fetal outcomes. So kind of being equipped with that knowledge from doing a birthing plan and knowing the questions to ask is a way to push back. However, I have been at a birth before that was super traumatic because the doctor came in and basically was like, your water broke and it's been 24 hours. So if we don't do a C-section, your baby's going to die from an infection. And I'm like, that is not even close to the research or the statistics. So knowing that information is so impactful. And then that's why it's also nice to take a course with your partner, because in the moment, you're not going to remember all of this information, but having your partner equipped or having a doula there who has a lot of this information. Because I even know for me, I've never just told a doctor no on a client's behalf, but I'm like, hey, can we have a moment to talk? And everybody kind of leaves. And then I'm like, hey, like, here's what's going on. Why don't you ask him this? Or why don't, see like what's really going on? Is this an emergency right now? Because C-sections do save lives. They're not like a bad thing. They were invented for a reason. And, but the problem is that like the World Health Organization says that a country's C-section rate should be between 10 and 12%. Well, Canada is at 29%. The United States is at 31%. That means 2/3 of the C-sections that are happening are not medical emergencies. So, and some of that isn't, the problem goes a little bit deeper. Some of that's not the provider's issue. Sometimes there's hospital policies, and it deals with like insurance and these higher head things that lead to that sometimes the doctor's hand is tied, that they're like, hey, our policy is if this happens, and this happens, we need to do a C-section. So again, looking at your hospital statistics, the policies, things like that. But the change starts when we demand it and choosing providers who are going to support you and choosing providers that have a lower C-section rate so that they aren't going to just recommend it for like any little thing, that a provider that you have good communication with, that is really going to keep you informed and that you can have good conversations with to know like, okay, I really trust this person. If they're saying that this is what I need to do, maybe that's something that we need to do. So finding that provider that believes in physiological birth and is down with your birthing plan, and you can have those, ask the hard questions with, have those open conversations with, will kind of make a difference then when you're in the moment in the hospital. Because if you're telling somebody who is in the middle of labor, you're exhausted, you're emotional, you want everything to be okay with the baby, then somebody's like, well, we just need to have a C-section. And it's this doctor who's supposed to know everything, you might just do it instead of having all the tools in your tool belt to make sure that you are making the best informed decision.
I love that. Sarah asked, I've read that there are various types of epidurals, some where you can still have the use of your legs for various birthing positions. Is that right?
Yes. So that's also why I love having a doula, even if you're planning on having an epidural, because if you're given a good epidural, you should still be able to use your legs. So I've been at a lot of births where they've been given an epidural and we still get on hands and knees to push, or we use the squat bar, or you're doing side lying. There's still a lot of great positions that you can use and should be used if you have an epidural. Again, that's where you want to make sure that you have a birthing team that's on board, because I know the hospital that I birthed at, if you get an epidural, they automatically put you with a peanut ball on your side and they rotate you, which is great. Because that's opening your pelvis, you're laying on your side, you're rotating to help the baby come down, but not all hospitals do that. They might give you an epidural and then you're just laying in your back in bed. So you want to make sure that if I do get an epidural, what are my options at this hospital? Like, ask your provider, like, hey, if I end up getting an epidural, what different positions can I still push in? What different positions can I labor in? That's a great question to ask, because there's still so much that you can do to help support you, your body, and your baby.
Amazing. And Lily commented, one of the best pieces of advice I got and used was asking for 10 minutes to think about it. If it is a true emergency, they will probably say no, but giving yourself time to process and think and remember, think of questions is so helpful. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And then somebody asked about the brain. So it's benefits, risks, alternatives. Like, okay, maybe they want to start you on Pitocin and be like, okay, instead of maybe starting me on Pitocin to get my labor going more, maybe I can walk around the room. Can I go for a walk? Can I bounce on the ball? Or if you have an epidural, be like, hey, I've been laying in this position. Can we maybe try a couple different positions first? Like sitting up, let gravity help before we start something else. So asking what your alternatives are, and then your intuition, and then what happens if we do nothing. Oh, somebody replied alternatives.
Great. Any more questions? That was just incredible. Thank you so much. I knew that this group would just love hearing you speak, because if you guys didn't notice, Elizabeth is a researcher. She knows percentages, research. She's such a great doula. And that's what I don't know. I don't know the research, but the research is so important. That's why someone like Brene Brown is so huge, because she is a researcher. She goes out and she looks at what happens. And that's what Elizabeth does in the birthing world. She's looking at, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at what is going on here, because what the research tells us a story. It tells us a story. And yeah, that was so great. I am going to end the recording there. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any last questions? Because I know people who watch the recording will like the questions too, because...
One resource I would give though, if you don't already listen to or follow the Evidence-Based Birth podcast, they are awesome. You can literally look them up and type in anything. Say evidence-based birth inductions, evidence-based birth Pitocin, evidence-based birth this. And this lady, she was a professor and then got her doctorate. And literally all she does is take the research and present it to you. Like, what is the evidence on getting induced for having a big baby? Like, hint, the evidence is not there. So like, but that's something that like your doctor might say to you. But when you're looking at, okay, if I'm being induced for my due date and the doctor's saying like, okay, if I go to 42 weeks, I have a 60% increased chance that I might have a stillbirth. Well, what are the actual numbers? It goes from 4 in 1,000 to 16 in 1,000. So now you have the actual numbers. Is that too much for you? That might be. You might be like, whoa, 16 is way too big of a number. I do not want to go to 42 weeks. Or you might be like, 16 is still such a low number, and I'm doing non-stress tests. I'm making sure I have good fetal movements. I'm doing everything I can. I'm fine waiting. So it's awesome because the way that she breaks down the research too is so that you can make, again, those best informed decisions, and you don't have somebody who's just making them for you. You can be like, well, I know that it's 60%, but I also know that it goes from 4 to 16. So I'm okay with that number. But then again, you have to have a provider who's okay with letting you go to 42 weeks. Not all providers do. So she just has such an amazing podcast, the research papers, everything. So that's like one of my go-to sources that I always tell people to look up if you have a question about, hey, my doctor wants to induce me for this thing. I'm like, look at evidence-based birth. All the research is there. And then you can make the best informed decision. And maybe you're like, yeah, I agree with my doctor. Or like, no, I think I want to wait. So she's such a great resource.
Thank you so much. Let's end the recording.